to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today are Laura Hale and Sam Page.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Indeed we are, and we are graced also by a special guest today, Juliana Dever, joining us, who's going to be talking about all of her world travels. She is like one of those people that you see on TV. I'm kind of surprised she's not on TV herself. You'll be able to judge for yourself, but I'm kind of surprised that she isn't like doing her own, I can't remember who all the people are who do these travel shows, but I mean, you'll find out. She's just that same kind of person, the kind who likes to make travel fun, make it all light and enjoyable, and appreciate all the good stuff that's out there. And we're going to find out about that in just a moment. But first of all, I want to say hello to my co-hosts, Laura and Sam. Laura, you look.
Hi.
I mean, we were talking earlier about how we got all of the audio working properly the first time around, so all the stress is off, right?
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, it's
We're
all
there.
Yeah. See, that's the way you want to start the show, right? No stress.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, because what's the point of the stress?
What is the point ever with stress?
That's right. And Sam, you've got a little special thing, a little improv piece set up for us today, right?
Yes, shall I do that now?
Yeah, let's hear what you got.
All right, let's see. Well, there you go. Sometimes that happens. Music just keeps the phone right off the piano.
You were putting out such high vibrations that the phone just got knocked right off the piano.
Hey, didn't stop me this time, so.
That's right. That's right. That's okay. Well, it's like everything else. We just keep trying this stuff over and over again, and eventually we'll get it just perfect because
exactly.
you get better at it over time. But that was very nice what we could hear, so thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Happy to do it.
Yeah.
All right. My secondary take.
So now that we have our mood set for the day, let's bring Juliana on. And Juliana, first of all, we're really glad you could join us today because there was a little construction going on in the background in your home. In fact, it was so loud that you couldn't even perhaps hear us. But somehow, thankfully, you have managed to make it disappear. I want to congratulate you on that.
I know. Well, I've moved everything to the furthest point away from the construction. My neighbors are today started demo for a pool, and it's right next to my studio. So there's jackhammers and earth movers and my dogs that are responding to the sounds, and so it's a bit of a cacophony today.
But somehow you managed to get them to all stop, which was really cool.
Well,
considering that you tried it and they said no, and they did anyway. I mean, it's pretty good.
Maybe, yeah. It's amazing how things work out sometimes.
Or the universe has facts.
That's right.
That's right. Absolutely. So give us a little background. Tell us, first of all, what your life has been and how you got into this whole travel thing, because I mean, it's a pretty cool gig. And then tell us about what you've been doing as you've been traveling.
Yeah, okay. I feel like my life is not linear at all, which I think maybe quite a few people are, but you sort of always expect it to be. And without going too deeply into my background, I was born and raised in Missouri, and I grew up in a certain kind of group that was like, we don't leave the group, and we don't do things. We like just do things that are small so that we can prepare for an eventual doomsday. And I was like, I was born and raised into it, my entire family, but I cannot relate. And my will could not be bent to ever become part of the group. And that presented a lot of massive challenges for my family. And it is what it is. So they wanted me to be like working in pre-printing, maybe be a cleaning person, work at an insurance company, all these things wonderful contributions that we all need, and just was not aligned with who I am at all. I just could not see myself continuing in this direction. So I ran away. And I really always just wanted to be an actor. I really wanted to be an actor, but there was always an intersection of travel for me. It's like my favorite story ever is The Wizard of Oz. Like, if I could be Judy Garland in the Midwest and a tornado would take me somewhere fabulous, and I would be traveling but also making friends all over the world. I mean, it was just like, it was a dream. And so I would put on plays in my backyard. I would make all the kids come watch me. It was 25 cents or a stack of Pringles, because I'm very food motivated, and you could see my shows. But it was not for me. It was for other people. And there's also kind of for my family, the idea that growing up in Missouri, to be something as large and crazy as an actor or traveling the world, that was maybe almost preordained for other people, maybe people that lived in California or were already in the industry, or, had reasons to travel. And I couldn't wrap my head around that. So I came to California. I worked for the airline business. I got to start traveling. Like, the first time I ever traveled, I was 18. The first time I was on a plane. So it was just, and I remember the first place I ever went were, because I worked for the airline, I was able to get free tickets. And I went to Canary Islands in Spain, and not Barcelona, but Madrid. And it was like Oz. It was like everything I thought that it would be and more. And I fell hopelessly in love with the world and people's stories. And so when I finally got to California, I ran away the second time to be an actor, to join the proverbial circus, if you will. And I just, I've stuck with it. I was very, very fortunate that my hard work coincided with being able to be on a television show on ABC for about 8 years. I still do. I did a Lifetime movie right before the pandemic. And I also just did a couple episodes in 911. So I'm super lucky. And then, but as you know, like, your dreams and that still isn't linear. And there are times, especially being an actor, I don't know whose bright idea that was, but it's not like you're bringing off the hook every day with work. And I'm like, I can't sit here in between this dream of mine and let the rest of my life kind of pass me by without seeing the world. And so I started with my travel blog. I had been traveling quite a bit, and people kind of recognized that in me and would ask, can I, what do I do when I go here? What do I, and so it seemed like and I loved writing, and it seemed like such a natural progression to start a travel blog. This was in 2015, and just kind of put it somewhere. And that way, when people asked, I could just send them a link instead of like starting over each time. And so it was a place to really be helpful, like, for me. And the brand of travel that I find that it's my style, I guess I want to say, is, I go all in, because for me, travel is, well, I feel like it's the cure to everything, but it is the landscape, but it's the people. And because I think we need each other. I know a lot of times we think we don't, but we can't survive without each other. And so I'm always on a mission to bring us closer together, and to travel to places where we're learning about someone else's culture, their traditions, their language, their food, share meals. And so I felt like I wanted to help share with other people, don't just show up and get the t-shirt and be observing from a distance. Here's how you can go and actually have a meaningful experience, and you can connect with people. Because I just show up in countries and I just sit down and start talking, and I've got best friends all over the world now. And so I can immediately be like, hey, I need help with this, or, so, and that was the basis. We'll talk later about my tours, but of why those got created. So bringing it all, landing the plane, as you will. I act when I'm here in the United States, and then I spend the rest of my time traveling and kind of curating more possibilities and sharing, so that other people can follow along on these travels, either virtually or come along with me. And yeah, did I answer your question?
So, well, the question was deliberately broad in order to give it the
Yeah.
opportunity to introduce yourself and help us know who you are. Honestly, the biggest reason I invited you to bring your story onto the program is because of what you were just talking about. How you, I mean, when we talk about law of attraction, what we're talking about is what you think about, what you dream about, what you give all your energy and your emotions to, and so forth, is what comes into your life. And you did that without hesitation, despite, in your own words, having a background of people who didn't want to have anybody go anywhere. You just stayed in your group, and you refused to stay in the group. You refused to stay within the box that others had built for you. You said, "I'm going to dream bigger than that."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And with that, as a little kid, I think there's so many facets to speaking about the law of attraction, right? And people have different feelings about it. And I think even on that spectrum, there's the super woo side and there's the science side, you
Sure.
know, and like your brain actually being a filter device, you tell it what you want and it starts bringing you or bringing it, you know, together. So yeah, before I even had any of those concepts, I think, and I've watched other things when kids get really focused on something and they achieve it, like they don't know what, like, well, I better sit here every day and focus on, you know, the law of attraction. They're just like this, I'm singularly focused on this one thing. And despite all obstacles, I mean, really, I mean, for me, I feel like I had some major obstacles in the form of an entire family, an entire community, an entire mindset of where I grew up, that I was not supposed to even think about those things. I was not supposed to do any of those things. And so the idea of still doing it, you know, I think it's a powerful case for how the law of attraction can work.
And how you work. I mean, because
yeah, maybe,
I mean,
or maybe I'm just a freak. I don't know.
well, the law is just, it's like the law of gravity. It's not like, you know, it's different for everybody. But what is different is the everybody part. Everybody has
Right.
their own stuff, their own interests, their own beliefs, their own things that they bring to the table, and therefore their own experiences. And that's the part that I think, well, that's part of the reason why we do the show, because exploring that is endless. I mean, there's no end to the possibilities when you look at that side of things. And I just looked at what you did and I said, she did it. She broke through every barrier that was placed in her way, and she did it seemingly effortlessly. I'm sure it wasn't. I'm sure there was a lot that you went through. But nevertheless, you just, like, nothing was going to stop you. Nothing.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you talk to my mom these days, she would agree that she felt that about me when I was still in utero. But you know, it's funny because on the outside looking in, every time, like when I do interviews or when I do different things and I give, you know, parts of my resume, and then I hear people saying, okay, I'm introducing Juliana and here's some, and I'm like, I did all those things? Because, you know, for yourself, you don't feel like every day, like we do have a tendency, like I think a lot of people maybe have the practice of like, you know, focusing on what I'm grateful for the day. Cause there's some days where you're just like, I'm just going to go back to bed and cry. Like nothing's working, you know? And so, and there's some days where it's bigger than you and the obstacles seem too big and it just seems like it's not going to happen. And so this is, in hindsight, you know, over like a couple decades of being like, sometimes it just feels like Sisyphean. Am I conjugating that correctly? You know, like you're just Sisyphus rolling this ball up the hill and it keeps rolling back over. I mean, even with my tours, you know, and I started them in 2019 and I have a real affinity for offbeat places. Because I feel like anyone who has the inclination, the means, that are fortunate enough to be able to travel, anyone can go to Italy or France. I'm like, let's go to Uzbekistan. You know, like I'm always like the weird one, right? And so I started tours to the country of Georgia, and then I started this year, and then so I got one amazing tour off, and then we had the pandemic. And I had to cancel everything. And it's like, okay, well, we're all in these consequences or in these, you know, we're all in this situation. And then 2021, I was able to get Slovenia. I was able to get 2 of those tours, but then cases in Georgia rose. And 3 weeks before my group was leaving, I had to make the difficult decision to cancel it again. And so 2022 comes and I'm like, okay, this is amazing because I have Slovenia, Georgia, and now introducing Poland. And And now I'm in this situation where, okay, the COVID is sort of behind us. But now I have the second horseman of the apocalypse riding in, which is war. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm taking, and I'm like, why does it always feels like I'm doing things the hard way? It always feels, and people who are helping guide my travel career are like, why don't you just go somewhere easy? Why don't you just go to France? Why do you keep going to former, possibly future Soviet countries? And I'm like, so, I appreciate what you say, because you're like, it's effortless. And I'm like, just yesterday, I was like, just fighting with Facebook to put up an ad. I was like, that's it. I'm done. So, we all have so many fun challenges, opportunities to try to make what we envision to come into our reality.
I actually like what you're saying there, because you're right. It's not effortless. I said it, you make it look effortless, but I knew that it really wasn't. I think what I was trying to point to was, even when it gets rough, you don't stop. You might take a break. You might, like you said, take a day off to go cry, but the next day you're at it again. You're just like, I'm going to find some way to get to Slovenia. I don't care what it's going to take. We're going to get there. And it may not be today, it may not be this year, but we're going to get, it's like, it never enters your mind that it's not ever going to happen. For you, it's going to happen.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes I should know when to give up, I feel like. But an example, I cannot see an experience, like if I've decided it's happening, and my guides even in Slovenia and Georgia, and they're always, and even in Poland, because the way that they come about, we can talk about that a little bit more, because it's not ordinary, but they're like, everyone, I meet people all the time when I travel, they're like, I want to do a tour, and I'm like, yeah, and it never happens. And you come in and you're like, I want to do a tour, and suddenly you've got 12 people here that I have to show around my country. And I'm like, well, I can't, it's hard for me to see. If I decide it's going to happen, I feel like, well, it's just got to. And I don't know if part of that is being an American. I feel like we have an extraordinary optimism. I feel like that maybe there's a piece, like we always have like optimism. I feel like now we're kind of like, wah.
I just saw this BuzzFeed thing. It was all about other people from other countries and what they think about Americans, and that was one of the things they said. There were some negative things, obviously, but that was they said they're just this like huge amount of optimism and this energy of if you're in the room with a bunch of people from different countries, you can tell who the American is because they're introducing themselves to everyone.
It's funny. I think that's part of it. The other part is maybe just, my personality, but when I was saying, like, case in point, so my first tour of last year, this is the very first time we're going to be I'm bringing a group to Slovenia. I had 2 Slovenian tours last year. So this is the very first one. And it's the first tour back from COVID. And so everybody, there was this pent up demand to travel, and yet a concern, with good reason, of like, is this going to be a safe thing to do? And none of the countries almost none of the countries had opened up yet to travelers. So my tour started on July the 3rd, and I'm very transparent, and I speak with the wonderful, amazing women that are on my trip, and I'm like, okay, well, I know some of you are flying in on July 1st. Country's still not open. Do we want to do this? And I am really lucky. I feel like something I always say, I attract the most amazing guests, and I feel without hesitation that that's absolutely one of the things that I can offer when I'm running down the benefits and the wonderful things about traveling with me. So far, I've had 3 tours that actually made it. Everyone comes as strangers. I tend to attract solo female travelers. Not that men aren't invited by any means. It's just I tend to attract solo female travelers, and they start as strangers. And before the tour even starts, because I've created this environment and they're able to connect with each other, they're already best friends. I see them walking around Ljubljana like, hey. And so I was really lucky. They were also rather fierce. They were rather adventurous. And so the idea, I was like, are you guys sure? Are you sure you want to do this? And they're like, we're going, you know, and if we get to the airport and they turn us away, then the tour cancels. But we don't, you know, because a lot of people will be like, I just can't deal with the uncertainty. Let's just cancel it and I'll just regroup next year. They were all in, which was amazing. I had to fly to Portugal previously, and I just had a feeling, and some of it's maybe it was just like a knowing, but some of it was also just travel expertise and watching the trends. And I'm like, Portugal's going to open up on June 15th. And so in March, my husband and I bought tickets to go to Portugal because we were looking at buying property there. And so it was like a week before June 15th. And I'm like, they're not open. I don't know. Maybe I was being, you know, too optimistic. And I ran out of time and I forgot to cancel our tickets. And then 4 days before, Portugal's like, hey, we're going to open on Wednesday. God. And that was on the 15th, which is exactly what my tickets were for. So we were one of the first Americans that didn't already have residency, you know, as a leisure traveler, got to Portugal. And part of the reason I'm also sharing this is that I have 2 weeks in Portugal and then I've got to get to Slovenia. I have a ticket from Lisbon to Ljubljana and on Lufthansa Airlines, which is in Germany. And Lufthansa, 3 days prior to my flight, which I need to go meet my guests and start a tour, 3 days prior, they're like, we're not going to fly anyone out of Portugal. We've just decided Portugal's numbers are too high, whatever. And they just canceled it. And I'm like, what do you rebook me on? And they're like, we're not rebooking you. Figure it out.
Figure it out.
But unfortunately for me, this is an awesome challenge because, of course, there's no way I will not make it to Slovenia. And I had, okay, I could get on a night train. Okay, I do have friends in Switzerland. Maybe if they drove to Spain and I could get to the border. Like it was a big fun puzzle. In the end, also because I have this network now, I had a friend that lived in Zagreb, Croatia, which is over the border. And I was talking to another friend who was German, who was telling me what Germany was doing. And without going through all the details, I managed to get a flight from Lisbon to Zagreb, Croatia, and then have someone book me a driver from Zagreb to Ljubljana. And then we had to go over the border by land. But I also had to say that I was staying a night in Croatia. But since I had a friend there, it was perfect. It was just like, and the driver's like, okay, so when we get to the border, just tell him that you're going to Austria. Like, wait, why is this going to be a problem? He's like, I don't know, just in case. But you know, I was just like, there was never a moment that I was like, I will make it. I will find a way to be there in time to be like, welcome to Slovenia. And you know what? July 3rd, it all worked out. So I don't know. I don't know how much of that is me like being lucky. How much of it is being like having travel expertise and how much of it is, you know, believing that this will happen and things falling into place so that it does. I don't know.
Sounds more like the adventures of Juliana Bond than Juliana Dever, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. Maybe I'm an international spy. We don't know.
I wouldn't doubt it. I put it this way. If you wanted to be an international spy, I would never bet against it.
Okay.
Not once. I want to ask Laura and Sam, because we're talking here a lot about travel. I haven't done a ton of traveling myself. Laura, have you done much traveling?
I've spent a lot of time in Mexico. I've traveled around Western Europe, and I've done the Camino in Spain, and I'm taking a group this fall, actually. So Spain's really what calls to me the most. And I used to want to see the world, and that has changed drastically. And I don't know. Now I'm just kind of like, there are certain places I really want to go, but other places, mostly because it's so crowded that I don't, like if it's a really crowded city, I'm kind of over the big metropolitan crowds. So, yeah, but well, I have a question for Juliana, but I can wait. Is it time for me to ask her a question?
Sure, go
wait,
ahead.
I'm like, wait, I need to understand. You said you used to want to see the world and now you don't. Is that specifically around crowds, or has the desire to see the world waned for you?
Both. Yeah. I think for me, it's the physical toll it takes on my body. Mm-hmm. So I have to really be like, I'd have to really want to go to that place and know that I could stay long enough that I could adjust. but I'm really curious about how you make Slovenia sexy. How do
It
you
isn't?
how do you
What are you talking
I don't know.
about?
I don't know anything. Okay, I don't know anything about it really. So how do you sell something that you, like you said earlier, anybody can go to Italy, but there's like a kind of like an energy that draws people to Italy or an energy that draws people to France, even Spain. I know people that are like, I don't really care about Spain, and I'm like, you're missing out. But so I'm curious about a place that is sort of like people are kind of like, I mean, I kind of know what that is. How do you sell that?
That's okay. So yeah, that's why I was like, I want to hear what, because I know it so well, and this is a problem that I have. I don't know what the technical term for it is, like a blindness. You know things so well, you can't remember how you felt before.
Right.
But I am curious. I will answer that if you explain to me what's your impression of Slovenia? When you hear Slovenia, are you just like,
I think it looks like, if I were thinking of like Germany, the Czech Republic, I would think it kind of looks like that. That's all I know.
when you say looks like that, do you mean villages or
The buildings,
scenery,
like the
landscape?
architecture, yeah, the
Okay.
landscape, scenery, architecture, yeah.
Okay. I mean, for me, Slovenia is probably I don't want to qualify because there are so many just amazingly beautiful places in the world. Even the country of Georgia, when you get to the Caucasus Mountains, you're like, what? But the Slovenia is like the real fairy tale. And if you've ever seen a photo of Lake Bled, which you have, but maybe you didn't know that it was, and then finally you're like, where is this place? And then you're like, ah. I mean, I think that's where everybody's awareness of Slovenia starts. But Slovenia, even in the years that I've been going, I see it coming out of its shell, which is super adorable because it's like the most wholesome country on earth. It's just so, and it's so, the air is so fresh and the nature is just like, it's so green. And Slovenians of almost everywhere that I've traveled have a more of an American, the friends that I've made, at least, they understand American sense of humor, like the dryness and the jokes, where a lot of times that gets lost in translation. So I can just be really smart aleck and say something, that's like very dry but sarcastic, and they'll, you go to another country and they're like, what do you mean? What is wrong? And I'm like, no, that was a joke. Forget it. I'm sorry, that was stupid. But in Slovenia, they give it right back, which is just like, so I immediately connected to them. But the cities, like, again, it's like one of the cleanest cities. Ljubljana, the main one, it's clean and it's beautiful. The people are welcoming, kind. They have really come into their own in terms of food and wine. Like they finally got their first Michelin stars in 2020, and like their food is bonkers. They're, and even in their, like, the agrarian areas, so their fruits, their vegetables are just vibrant, and they're the Alps. They have the Julian Alps, and they're just stunning. I take my guests over the Alps. We go to remote places where you meet with families and you just connect with their soul, and they cook for you, and then they get their guitar out and they sing with you. And I think when you see the stuff that I write about Slovenia and the pictures that I take, and you meet some of my Slovenian friends, you see, like, it's not just looking at a really pretty building from the 1800s. It's
Right.
about, and that's one thing that I try when I create a tour, it has to go to the essence of the spirit of the country and of the people, so that when you're there, you connect with that. You almost feel like a steward of that culture when you go home, and your awareness, your cognitive bias toward it is, you're like, what happened in Slovenia today? Or what happened in Georgia? So I feel like Slovenia is, it's hard to say sexy because they're so wholesome. They're so adorable, but it really, when you start seeing like the crystal turquoise waters of the Socha River and the Alps and just everybody outside, and their love of chocolate and amber wine and amazing food. And you're like, everyone who goes on my tours, I have actually 2 women on my July tour that went last August with me, and then they rebooked so they could go back because they fell in love with it so much. So, I think it's more than selling the destination. It's about
Right.
connecting with the human beings that are of that place.
Well, I think you did a really good job of selling it.
I wish I had a slideshow. So
Oh, yeah.
You don't need a slideshow. Just mention the chocolate. That's good enough.
Right, that was it. And the mountains.
And the mountains.
Chocolate in the mountains.
That's it. Yeah, that's your selling points. Sam, you
Well,
there?
yeah, I was. Oh yeah, I was just about to say myself. I'm sold on Slovenia, so that's you know, places I have been though. I've been to various states in the United States and Canada a few times, but then I went to England when I was 13 with family, which was quite lovely. As enjoyed it as much as a 13 or so year old would, and then been to France a couple of times. Once with my high school orchestra, we went to Biarritz, which is in the Pays Basque, which is kind of coastal and near the Spanish border. So we did make our way a couple like day trips up to Spain, which was cool. That was when I was 16. And then just about 4 years ago, I went on a family trip to Paris, which was just beautiful. And definitely want to go there again. But I think I can see the argument. Like, I'm not big on crowds either, but there's just like a nice, like, I wouldn't have said this at the time, but just vibrational energy in Paris that's just feels kind of magic. And I've also been to China, and I'd love to go to Japan someday, but there's a lot of places I want to go that I haven't been, but plenty of time left, plenty of opportunities. So I think traveling is a wonderful thing of which I want to do a lot more going forward, just to experience new cultures, cuisines, and perspectives, and all the beautiful nature-y things that are out there that plenty I probably don't even know about.
Yeah, I find that when you have that list of places you want to visit and you start traveling and checking them off, the list doesn't get shorter. It starts getting longer and longer, and you're like, oh no.
Yeah,
now I
because
have all these places.
Yeah, you meet people and they suggest places and you're like, well, that wasn't on my list, but now it is.
Now it is great. Now I have to go to Iceland.
You make it sound like going to the dentist. I mean, come on.
No, I love Iceland. I do. And it's one of those places that is really ethereal, and yet it's that crowd issue. You know, once somebody is like, once somebody sees that picture, like that, there's the good and the bad edge of that sword, right? Like you get people to finally explore an area, and tourism dollars really helps communities if it's like spent in the right way. Mm-hmm. And so it's fantastic. But then all of a sudden you have like a Venice or a Barcelona where it's so crowded that it's not enjoyable. And even the local community no longer has services that are easy for them to get to. Their day-to-day life is impacted. The house, you know, the cost of living goes up for them because of different rental issues. And so it is like, it's a double-edged sword, because I do, as much as I love being, like I was talking to my friend yesterday. I'm planning a trip to Albania right now, where everybody wants to go, right? Everyone's like,
it's just reminding me of a Saturday Night Live skit with Tina Fey.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking of now.
Well, because I'm like, I've traveled to so many places, and again, my list never gets shorter, but I'm like, and it's a little bit harder this year. I keep trying to get over to Estonia and Lithuania and Latvia. Like 5 years now, I've had plane tickets that I keep canceling, and I couldn't quite convince my friend to get that close to the Russian border. So I'm like, how about Albania? Because I'm like, I still have to. It's like, you know, when you like anything you do, you have to do a little bit more each time to get that same, like, I'm going to say rush. But that same, like that thing that you love, you have to keep pushing it. But I also when I create my tours, the thing is, like, there is absolutely, like Sam, like you were saying, like there's a vibe. Like I've done forest bathing in Sweden, and it's amazing to get out of your, you know, like away from people and just be quiet and feel like there's no one else, and you're around trees, and it's incredible. But it's a balance. You need to go back. Loneliness will kill you. You need to go back to being around other human beings, you know, like we need both of those. And so give me an opportunity to be not too crowded, but, you know, that vibe of like being around other people, and maybe somebody's playing a guitar and then someone else breaks into song and someone shares their food with you. And I mean, you're recharged. So I try to create, another reason I create tours that are so off the beaten path. You know, I think that it's so important with our tourism dollars that we're positively impacting local communities. So for when I scout them, I make sure I work with local guides. I'm always working with the people that are in the community, like some of the best guides in the world. I'm so lucky that the women that are my guides. And then, like, for instance, for Poland, Maggie, my guide, we drove around Poland. We actually looked on Google Earth. She was looking on Google Earth in Polish and found a woman who is a goat farmer. And we off-roaded to her house, knocked on the door, had a whole conversation in Polish and a bit of French. And, you know, we got to the point where we had warmed her up and charmed her enough that one of the things we're doing on my tour is bringing all of my guests to her farm. She's going to make a lunch for us with the cheese, and we get to meet the goats, but she also happens to direct the local choir, so she's going to have them come in and sing for us. And then she also teaches art on the weekends, so she's going to have some of the artisans come in and they'll be painting or doing their crafts, and they'll just be around us while we're hanging out, exchanging, you know, learning from each other. And so, like, you don't have to be in a city where you can't move. I detest it, but to be in the spirit of other humans and all the good we have to give to each other, it just makes me so happy, and it makes my guests super happy, and I love it.
What I'm taking away from this, from what you just described, is that you're not just a tour guide, you're an experience guide.
Yeah, I actually call myself an experiential travel expert.
Okay.
Because I've been traveling for 25 years. I know you saw that. You put it in the bio on Facebook. I've been to over 60 countries at this point. I lived in France. I've lived in Greece. I've lived in Russia. So I've got a lot of travel expertise. But I think if you don't put the experiences with it, you're maybe not getting the maximum impact that travel can actually give you.
Well, you're getting to know the culture in a way that is not just a dry presentation by a professor in a classroom. You're getting a firsthand experience of this is what it's like to be here. This is what the people are like. This is what their experiences are like. This is real life. Yeah,
and I think I've always had I personally can't, and I don't know if it's like my self-diagnosed ADD, you know, but like I cannot be in a cluster of like 20, 40, 60 people following an umbrella or a flag while someone just kind of drones on about something that I could have read online, you know? Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's also a weird fishbowl way of traveling, you know, where you're just walking around, you're like, oh, look at the Italians over there. And, you know, I'm being my dad right now. And, you know, and you're just like, you see it, but you don't experience it. And I'm like, well, you can watch that on TV. I mean, yeah, there's always something amazing about getting out of, you know, your surroundings. It's so inspiring and learning and changing your perspective and seeing how people do things. And they're like, why didn't I think of that? That's amazing. But when you're sitting down and you're eating and you're visiting and you're with people, that is next level travel. And I just want everybody to have that experience if that's what they're into, because it will change you. It ignites radical empathy. You just, you know, your love for this planet. It's just, I don't know. It just makes me so happy. I'm such a sap. I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. That's not something to apologize for. That's something to celebrate. That's wonderful. I love that you're like that. I do have one question. You mentioned your dad. Made me wonder. Everybody in your family, in your community, it was all in one box. Everybody stayed in the box. Has anybody climbed out of the box and gone on a tour with you?
Well, you know, nobody in my family had a passport. I mean, except for my grandfathers were in World War II, but I don't think they needed passports to do that. I don't know how that went. Anyway, my mom has. I'm really excited. My mom has followed where I've started, and I took her. It really was her dream. I think a lot of people, you know, they have this dream. Maybe they get the image and they want to see Paris, or they want to see Big Ben. And so that's where it starts. And she always had a dream that she wanted to see Paris. And so I don't know, like maybe about 8 years ago, finally, I was like, okay, we're going to do this. And we're going to do it my way. And you're just going to trust me. I planned an entire trip where she had no idea what was happening.
Wow.
And here's what's really funny is like, I also kind of like when I know someone, I did this for my best friend as well for her birthday. When I know someone and I'm like, okay, I know where I'm going to take. I'm going to start this country. Like I always have a formula for who it is. And I'm like, they can't just start in Paris. It would be overwhelming. So I'm going to start them in the Netherlands because it's a little smaller. And then they'll kind of get used to, like I've got the pathway in my head. Here's the funny part about having a, like 68-year-old woman show up at the airport. And at the time, like I got her ticket and she just had her record locator number. And, you haven't needed paper tickets for a while. So she shows up, gives them her name and her record locator on the day of the flight. I told her when to travel and what to pack. And she goes to the counter and they're like, hi, okay, where are you going? And she's like, I don't know. And I thought that would be like so fun, like a game show. And they'd be like, congratulations, you have a flight to Amsterdam. But instead, it kind of made her look like maybe she wasn't in her right mind or her own faculties weren't there. Maybe she shouldn't get on a plane. It seemed like such a good idea. Right, though? Right? Because she flew and met me in Houston, and then we took the big league together. But it opened her eyes. And one of the comments that she made, which it was so very much my mom, and yet I get it, was we were walking. One of the things that I love to do, I don't know if you guys are, I'm just weird. I know this, but I love to go to grocery stores in other countries. I love to see what food they have and, like how it's packaged and what is the predominant,
Sure.
types of food. But I took her to the grocery store and we were in Amsterdam. And also sometimes I rent little apartments and we're getting some snacks and food. And she just stops and she looks around and she sees everyone just going about their life, putting groceries in their cart. And she looks at me and she says, it's so weird to be here. All these people are just going about their life and no one cares about St. Charles, Missouri. And I was like, yeah, it's weird, isn't it? How the rest of the world, it doesn't revolve around us like we think it does. But you know what? But that's that first step. And it's amazing where you're suddenly like, oh, people are living their lives and I'm not the center of their life. Maybe I need to kind of, give a little deference that other people are doing their own thing. And we need to live in harmony instead of like, well, why aren't you catering to me? I'm here from the United States. Aren't you? You're welcome. So I love that was a first step for her. And she took trains. I didn't realize she didn't know what crosswalks were. She hadn't used them in so long because they just get in their car and they drive. People don't walk in the suburbs, so she went to markets and people were like yelling out in French and she's like, wow. And I think it really was a turning point in her life. She still talks about it to this day of, oh, remember when we were in Luxembourg or, and so I just see the power that getting out of your, I hate saying comfort zone because I feel like it gets used for everything like a catch-all, but just getting out of what you know. Mm-hmm. And suddenly you're like, there's a different way to do this.
I call it the familiar zone rather than the comfort zone. And in this case, it's very unfamiliar.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is also great in that what you're really talking about is the power of perspective. I talk about that a lot here on the program. And I usually talk about it in the context of what we do here on the program because I'm constantly bringing on people from all over the place, different viewpoints and so forth, because I love the perspectives. But what you're really bringing out for me here, and something that's kind of encouraging me, because I've wanted to travel for some time. I've been throughout most of the country of the U.S. I've been to Canada. I've been to Barbados. That's about it. And I have other places I want to go. But now you're giving me even more of a spark to do it because of the perspective. I'd kind of forgotten. Yeah, that's one of the great things. You get to see what it's like from other people's perspective in other parts of the planet. And that perspective is huge. That's really what you're describing is that perspective.
Yeah, I love it. I love not being right. If that makes sense. Like I like saying like, I don't have to be right. I want to be understood, but I don't like where I'm coming from, like my intention. but I kind of like not being right. Like, oh, that was really cool. So even the little things like, when you put your key in the little switch inside the door at the hotel to turn the lights off and on and the air conditioner, and you're like, this is ingenious. They're not wasting all this energy when you're not in the room. I love this. This is awesome. Like, I love that stuff.
That's the way it should be, though. I think it's fabulous. I think it's absolutely great. And I love that you're bringing that as part of the story here. Now, we have been talking a bit about the tours that you do. I want to make sure we get some time in about what tours are coming up, because I presume they're still open, or at least some of them are. I mean, are they? I don't know. Maybe they're booked. You tell me.
They are. They have a few spots left. And the first one that's registration is closing on May the 6th for Poland. I have 2 trips to Poland. And the first one is June the 6th through the 16th. There's, I think, like 3 spots left. And so there's still time to get in on that one. And then after that, the country of Georgia, that's June 20th through the 29th. And that'll be open until about 30 days prior. The registration usually closes about 30 days. And then 7 days, Poland's 11 days, Georgia's 10 days, Slovenia is 7, and that's July 3rd through the 9th. I kind of position that so if you have a little time off from, the 4th of July, you can fly over on the weekend, stay for the week, and then go home and still be back to work on Monday. I mean, hectic, but awesome. So those are the 3 tours that are happening. And then in the late summer, August 29th through September 8th, I have another tour to Poland. And I absolutely, if you love culture, if you love just learning about a place from another perspective, being in places that have amazing vibes, but then also we will get out of the crowded areas. Not that I ever go anywhere too crowded. Obviously, these are not like mainstream locations, but we really dig in and we meet amazing people. We break into small little groups and you get to have dinner with locals. Like in Slovenia, you go into, like, my tour guide, I mean, all of them are amazing. But I'm just going to talk for a second about my Slovenian guide, Tina. She's been an independent tour guide for 25, 26 years now. The last 20 with Rick Steves. I know a lot of people are familiar with Rick Steves. So she's one of his tour guides for Europe, but she was born and raised in the Lake Bled area of Slovenia. And what's amazing, there's so many things. She's a very close friend of mine at this point, because I met her the first time I ever went to Slovenia, and then I was like, I'm sorry, you're stuck with me. Like, we're friends now. That's just how it is. There's no options. And so I went back to her and I'm like, Tina, let's do a tour. She's like, yeah, sure. And then she was like, oh my God. And so
well, wait a minute, she really meant this. Hold on.
She meant this. Oh no. They're coming.
The Americans are coming. The Americans are coming.
And a sidebar with that, on my 7-day tour last July, I had, and this blew me away, I had, like I would say half were Americans, and I had a woman from Qatar, I had a woman from Germany, and a woman from Austria. She's Vienna. That's a 3-hour drive. And I'm like, wait, you just paid me to take you to a country that you could drive to in 3 hours? But, she's like, I never thought about coming here before. And I'm so in love with this country now. But what I want to say about Tina was, because she decided, right after school, she wanted to be a tour guide. They go through a rigorous school, like a university. And so she went through university with all of her contemporaries now, her age, are like some of these Michelin star chefs and people who own small little tourism, like an apiary where we go to, learn a little bit about bees and then try honey vinegar. And so they're all her friends, which is amazing. And so when we break into small groups to go to people's houses, these are also some of her friends, and you go to their homes and they've made dinner for you. They're kind of, making sure you have schnapps, because this is a very Slovenian thing to drink. People come home from that experience and they're like, I felt like I just went out to dinner with friends. I didn't feel like I was on a tour at all. And you have a moment to be with a couple of your tour mates, just, maybe 2 or 3 of you. So there's something just so special about all of the things that we do on these tours. And we do that in each group. When you go to the country of Georgia, you get to have dinners, again, break into small groups and have dinners with locals. In Poland, we're going to be doing the same thing. And it's such an extraordinary experience. time to connect. It's almost time to like reconnect your own humanity. Because I feel like we've spent so much time on these things that it's like a barrier between us. And I know when I throw that away and I'm just like with people, I feel like my battery is charged so much more than a half hour scrolling. So it's something that's like, treat yourself, like come with us, because I'm on the tours. I still ensure that I'm with everybody so that it's all going exactly how I've designed it. And my guides are some of the best in the world. They train guides. My guide for Poland is an anthropologist, and she was a guide for National Geographic. My Georgian guide teaches all the other guides. She's kind of renowned as one of the top guides in Georgia. So like between all of us, we've got you. Like you just show up and you're going to have an amazing experience. And I also build a lot of free time into it. So you can just go and explore on your own and kind of process what you're experiencing, you know? So because I think when people make you go, I've been on certain trips where it's like one thing to the next, and you're like, I can't. I did that in Mongolia, and I was on like a trip where they have like travel agents come. It's called the familiarization trip. And we got to a certain point where we just revolted. Like the group, we all got together and we're like, we're not leaving. We're just sitting here in this yurt. Because we were all about to have a mental breakdown. Like you need space, you need time. So I make sure we have free time. And so I've said a lot about why I love my tours, but again, I attract amazing people. So if you have ever been interested in incredible food and wine and culture, traditions, we do some hiking, like come with me. Like there's still some room available, and there's still available for a couple more weeks.
That's outstanding. I especially love the idea of dinner with a local. What better way to get to know the people of a country than to sit down and have dinner with them?
I love it. I had an experience the first time I went to the country of Jordan in the Middle East. I was welcomed in the first night to this local's house. She's actually one of my closest friends now. I say that about a lot of people, but everyone's in my heart.
I can tell it's true.
Much.
It's true with all of them.
But I'm always messaging like, how are you? Are you okay? But we were at her house. We became very close. And like day 2, I want to say this was 2014. And I was like, I need to know how 9/11, let's go. I need to process this with somebody from an Arab country. What was your perspective on this, you know? And when people instead of being so polarizing all the time and refusing to speak, refusing to understand, wow, the things you can meet in the middle on, or the things, and when having said that, you know, every single one of my friends in Arabia is 100% against, you know, horrified. Like everywhere that I go in the Middle East, I find they love Americans more than half the places I go to in Europe. So, but you know, it's
that's interesting.
They're so pro-America, and you know, or at least they're not always, you know, governments are not people, so they're not always necessarily pro-American government, but the love that we can, and compassion and understanding that we can extend to one another through travel can change the world. So, you know, that's why I'm such a massive advocate of it. And it gives you that spark, that inspiration to come home. And that's with my mom, you know, like she suddenly was like, you know, kind of looping it back to law of attraction, all the things that she thought, almost that ability to call it to you gets deadened because you don't exercise it and you don't believe that it's possible anymore. You don't have examples. And then you do something crazy, like go to a grocery store in Amsterdam. And then you're like, well, if I can do that, maybe I could go home and I could start writing. I could write a book, you know? And then suddenly you're bringing these things back into your life that you just didn't remember that it was possible. So again, travel cures everything. Yeah. That is my thesis statement.
Hey, I'm buying into it. I really am. And I'm loving everything that you're saying. I do need to throw one thing out there. You mentioned Rick Steves. He was actually the person I was trying to think of earlier on when I was referencing all these famous people who are on TV who do travel shows. And I had him in my mind. I couldn't think of his name. But I'll tell you right now, having watched the Rick Steves show and all the different places he's visited and talked about, and having talked with you here, I would much rather go on your tours. I'd much rather see your tours on TV.
Same.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. No, I'm like, I agree. Let's do it.
Yeah, you need a travel TV show.
You
Period.
do. You'd be great at it.
I thank you. I have been trying for years. Couple interesting things. I know we don't want to go. I don't want to take up all of your time because I know your audience is used to an hour. So, the first time I pitched a travel TV show with my best friend, because we're in entertainment, she's an actor as well, and very curious. We had an amazing concept, we thought, and actually Travel Channel loved it as well. And we got into talks to go further with it. And one of the things that comes up, and I really hope this will begin to change. I think it's changed even in the last few years. This was 2014, and a lot of networks were like, nobody wants to watch two women travel unless you're going to be in bikinis. Like, men
really?
want to
Still
men.
there. Oof.
That was the issue in 2014 because what they call it co-viewing. Women will sit down and co-view a travel show. The men, you're watching Anthony Bourdain, or you're watching, Drive-In Diner. You're watching a guy because you're enjoying learning about places. Men are like, I can only accept this if I see myself in this person doing it. And so they knew they had to cater, and the only men will either want to see, like hot women in bikinis, or they want to see dudes doing things. And that at the time was one of the issues. The issue that's kind of switched a little bit, or a new layer, is the idea that Travel Channel actually doesn't do travel anymore, because us travel lovers have shot ourselves in the foot by putting all the content online for free. Right. So all the YouTube, you want to know what it looks like to hike in Slovenia, go to YouTube. You'll find a video. So why should they spend money doing this? And so that was a new layer. But we had a fantastic show concept, and we did it on spec in 2018, where we would go and it was a fun challenge for me. We just dropped ourselves into Europe, and then every day we would go live from a new location. We're like, okay, your options for tomorrow: I can go to the Czech Republic, I can go to Budapest. Like, where do you want me to show up? And they would vote, and then by that night we would have to find a train and go whichever direction, and then come live the next day. And in the meantime, we'd be producing content. And that got really far. In fact, we were in talks with the production company and then with the network, March of 2020. So you know where that went.
But knowing you're such a persistent person. This isn't the end of that story. That story is going to continue until you actually get that gig. I know it's going to happen. By the way, I'd also like to ask those executives who were telling you that in 2014 how they explained Samantha Brown.
He was the outlier. You know how that goes. They're like, well, let's not do too much of that.
Because let's be honest, she was the best one of the group.
Yeah, absolutely. She's engaging and she's witty. And it's funny how, some of them are a little dry or very cerebral, or just, like, so I'm sure I'm going in whatever direction I'm supposed to be. We'll see.
You're going to get there. I know you're going to get there. It may be independent, but you're going to get there. One way or another, you're going to get there. We're going to see you on television. I'm sure it's going to happen one of these days. Before we part company for the day, I know you got the tours. You have the website, which you kind of gave a little promo at the beginning, but let's do it at the end. How do people find out about you? How do they find your blog? How do they find your tours? How do they reach you?
Yes. So my social media handle is Clever Dever, my last name, wherever. So just like it sounds, Clever, and then Dever, Dever, wherever. And you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram under @CleverDever, wherever. If you want to read more about my tours, you can do a couple things. You can go to my website, which is cleverdeverwherever.com, and then click on tours, and you'll see all the ones that are available. Or you can just DM me on Instagram or on Facebook. I check them, and I can just give you information. If you want to book like a free 15-minute call with me and be like, I feel like I want to go to Poland, but do I want to go to Poland, or just tell me more? I'm happy to hop on a call with you and just kind of talk it through and see if it's right for you, if it's something that you really are into. So just Clever Dever wherever, everywhere you find that.
And it rhymes, which is easy.
See?
Beautiful. Absolutely fabulous. This has been great, Juliana. Thanks so much for telling your story. for sure.
Yeah,
Your
thank you.
experiences. I love the experiences. We always like stories around here. I mean, that's not
I've got
surprising,
them. I've got so many stories. I'll come back sometime and I'll talk about how I was trapped in a Russian apartment in St. Petersburg sometime.
Okay, so now we have a trailer. That's a good start. Yeah.
I've got many stories. But yeah, thank you. It was so lovely to spend this last hour with you. You all are just like glowing, wonderful humans, and I'm so happy to connect. So thank you for the invite.
And thank you, Sam, for the improv at the beginning. As usual, that was
Thank you,
wonderful
Sam.
to hear.
Did my best. Thank you. Always happy.
Well, it was even cool when they knocked the phone off the piano through the vibration. I thought that was really good too.
I totally dug it. I was into it. It was like, what happens next?
Right. And Laura, as usual, I mean, I have to admit, between you and Sam, I didn't realize you guys were such world travelers.
Yeah. I mean,
mean-
now you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, now
You just add to the list of things we can talk about. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
true.
So thank you very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We appreciate you as well. And we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.